I believe the symbolic nature of 4 and the significance that it has to mankind is that it's a very low number and it happens to be double 2, meaning it's 2 times 2. So it's a doubling of 2. So 2 is always going to be important, obviously. It's a pair, male and female, dark and light. It represents, dichotomies and a juxtaposition of one thing on top of another thing. It represents polarities, left, right. And then when you double it, you get left, right, up, down. So then you get Cartesian coordinates, you get north, south, east, west, 2 dimensions versus 1. Or say 4 tires on a car instead of 2. So it's kind of like 2 bicycles side by side with a huge, cargo in the middle. So I would say 4 is when numbers start to get more difficult to visualize, and then after that, people take prime numbers and multiples of 5, typically after that. So once you get 1, which is important, 2, which you see a lot in human society, then you see 3, obviously, tripods, trifecta, tribunals, and then you see 4, obviously, north, south, east, west, Cartesian coordinates, 2 dimensions, left, right, up, down, 4 elements, but I've seen also like 5 elements. So the fact that the number 4 is low is going to be easy to find examples of things that are 4. So that's not to say that elements are intrinsically bound to the number 4, because all you've got to do is Google earth, wind, fire, water, spirit, and you'll find a whole lot of people on the internet that think there are 5 main elements to things. So then what about 6? What about 7? What about 8? So obviously the number 4 being low, a low number makes it easy to find examples of things that tend to come in 4s because it's easy to do. It's easy to cut something in half and then half again. It's easy to double it, then double it once more. There are certain numbers also that people tend to stick to once you get outside of the realms of physics. So once you get outside of physics, which would be where art would come into play, like you're going to draw 4 things, and then you're going to draw 5 things. Well, there aren't too many things that are drawn that are 27, that are 39. You don't see that very often. It's a little bit too complicated. It's a bit too busy, I think. It's difficult to picture in your mind's eye. So it's going to be something that's not going to be something that an artist is going to be inspired to draw or paint or something, because they're not going to picture in their mind 39 of something and then draw the Sistine Chapel with 39 of something. They might, but it's a whole lot less likely for them to do 39 or 41 or 46 than it is, say, 4 or 7. So humanity tends to stick to, like I said, 1 and 2, which is double and pairs, and then 3, trifectas. 4, you have all examples of 4, quite a few of them. And then there's 5, so you get stars, penta. There are lots of things that you'll hear pent. So in music, there are 5 key singing notes that are very, very critical. It's like called a penta something, I don't remember. And then you have 6, which is hex, and then you have 7, which is a prime number. Every now and then you get 8, but almost never do you get 9. So notice as the numbers get higher, you can think of less examples of something, can't you? So how many things can you think of that come in 8s? Not too many. Some do, but not too many, and that would probably be because it's 2 to the 3rd. So there are quite a few things that can come in 8s because it's 2 times 2 times 2. And then you get it again and you get 16. So you get lots of exponents. So there are lots of things you'll see in 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on and so forth. Some things multiples of 3's, but not as often. You see lots of doublings, so times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And then, of course, that's the same as 4, because it's just it's just double of whatever it was times 2. So multiples of 2 tend to be also multiples of 4. So the fact that 4 is a multiple of 2 is probably a high degree as to why it's so significant. It's probably a big part of why you see lots of things in 4's is because it's just 2 times 2. And then you'll see also 8's, but as the numbers get higher, it becomes more difficult to represent things in those numbers. Like, it's pretty hard to think of 32 of something. You can, but it's a lot easier to come up with 16 or 8 or 4 or 2. And also, so then, what about 9? So how many laws do you know that are punishable with 9 years imprisonment? How many of them will fine you $9,000? How many give you 9 days in jail? And the reason that I use law and politics and what have you is because they're often arbitrary numbers, and they don't have to mean anything. It's just a politician or a lawmaker just makes up a number and says, here, whatever, I get paid either way. And so they just come up with a number that sounds good. So in the context of governmental organizations, you tend to see 1 through 4, then you'll see multiples of 5 and prime numbers. Every now and then you also see a dozen, and I'm not quite sure where a dozen came from, but you do tend to see a dozen. You tend to see 12 of things. You tend to see 12 of things in other areas of life as well, not just within governmental organizations, but you'll see a 12-year sentence or a 12 months, in fact, in the year. In fact, there are 12 months in the year. That's a good example. You see there are quarters. You'll tend to file your taxes quarterly if you're self-employed. That's a common practice. And you have fiscal quarters as well. And again, that seems to be dividing in half and then dividing in half once more. So then you get 4 times per year. You have semesters as well, which are 2. And then you have 2 of those, and then each of those is broken down into weeks and what have you. But you see 4 because it's half of half, and it's double 2. So it's double of a doubling, and it's half of a half. And I think that's why you see quite a bit of 4. And again, like I had said, outside of that, once you get to 5, you tend to see multiples of 5 from then onward. Like you see things that have a statute of limitations, for instance, of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes you see 4, usually not. It usually skips straight to 5, and then 7, and then 10. And then from there, sometimes you get 12, 13, 15, 20. One of the main times you'll ever see, one of the only times, I should say, that you'll ever see off or odd numbers, like you'll see 26, would be, say, a combination of 2 12-year sentences and a 2-year sentence. Or you'll see oftentimes pay, something that's actually based on something that's calculated and something with a numerical basis and a physical basis, meaning they found out that they could pay 10% of costs, say, in labor. So 10% of cost averages out to, say, $9 an hour. So you get a $9 an hour wage at a job, because those are based on things that are based on physics. Those are based on numbers, on tangible things. But when you get things that are generated from the human mind, that come from the human mind, you tend to get prime numbers, and you tend to get multiples of 5, and you get multiples of 2, and 4 is a multiple of 2. And again, 4 is also easy to represent visually, so then it gets put into art. And since it gets put into art, you see it all over the place. And so since it's in art, and art it tends to be timeless and tends to significantly affect cultures, it's pervasive. So that's what I think the significance of 4 is. Thank you for your time.